If you wanna be solicitors, why don't you come and visit us at SQE TV?
This is SQE TV, the YouTube channel for wannabe solicitors with me, Jonny Hurst. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at further misunderstandings about the SQE in SQE Myths and Half Truths, Part 2.
SQE TV.
In the first part of SQE Myths and Part Truths, we unpacked a number of common misunderstandings that students have about the SQE regime, and we're going to do more in this episode for you. Starting off with, the SQE syllabus will prepare you for practice. Well, it might do in some respects, but in others you'll fall short, and we'll explain why. Secondly, we often hear you can't get funding for an SQE prep course. Well, sometimes you can. We'll explain. Thirdly, I often hear QWE is the same as an LPC training contract. Well, sometimes it does look like one, but in other respects it can be completely different. Again, we'll unpack that to explain why. And finally, we often hear SQE online courses are all very similar. Well, that's a complete fabrication. They're not, and you need to understand the differences between them so you make sure you choose the right course for you if you're looking at an online option. So let's have a look at each of these one by one.
SQE TV.
The SQE syllabus will prepare you for practice is a half-truth. Let's explain why. It's a half-truth because the syllabus, FLK, functioning legal knowledge as we call it, only includes property, business, wills and administration of estates, dispute resolution and criminal practice. So you'll see immediately there's no general practice areas like family law, employment law, immigration law or personal injury, no corporate areas like debt finance, equity finance and mergers and acquisitions. However, if you opt to choose a master's course at a university, a reputable one that includes not just the SQE syllabus but a whole host of these practice areas, you can get them covered before you go into practice, and many firms like that, and it might give you an edge in the recruitment process. So always remember that the SQE syllabus is a minimum floor, not a maximum ceiling.
SQE TV.
You can't get funding for SQE prep courses is a half-truth at best. Let me explain why. Now, the default position actually is that you can't get funding for the majority of SQE courses. However, there's one very important exception, and those are SQE Masters courses, because they do qualify for funding from Student Finance England. And these are SQE courses wrapped up in Masters that include a whole host of really useful additional learning and training, specialist practice area knowledge that will come in really useful when it comes to the recruitment process, but also enhanced skills training that will improve your prospects in the recruitment process. So do check out SQE Masters. It comes with the benefit of over £12,000 worth of funding, and therefore can make the difference between some candidates being able to start an SQE and not. So do check them out.
SQE TV.
QWE is the same as an LPC training contract is a half-truth at best. Let me explain why. Now, under the old LPC training contracts, you would work 2 years continuously at a single law firm. That model, of course, is alive and well under the new QWE regime because many firms are still recruiting in the same way and are hiring for the whole of the 2-year period. But it's not the only way you can accrue QWE. You can work for multiple employers, up to 4 over a 2-year period, and it doesn't have to be continuous. Also, you could work in a single practice area over that 2 years, very different to the old LPC style training contracts where you had to rotate in multiple seats and do at least one contentious or litigation seat. Under the QWE regime, you do not have to do anything to do with litigation if you want to focus purely on regulatory work or transactional work or something that's non-litigious. So a lot more flexibility under the QWE regime.
SQE TV.
SQE online courses are all very similar is a complete myth. Let me explain. And I think the reason why a lot of students believe this is because their experience is tainted by what happened to them during the pandemic, where typically online learning was here's a reading list, maybe here's a video, go figure, with very little, if any, tutor support. And don't get me wrong, there are some really cheap but poor SQE courses out there that are very much of that type. Don't touch them with a barge pole unless you are a complete self-starter and you're prepared to take a little bit of a gamble. But most students appreciate that input from tutors and interaction with students where your learning gets validated. You can ask questions, get them answered instantly as you go along, and that is the type of online course that we would certainly recommend at SQE TV that replicates the in-classroom experience. So yeah, there's online courses and there's online courses, very different ones.
SQE TV.
That was SQE Myths and Half Truths Part 2, coming soon in Part 3. It doesn't matter what type of SQE prep course you do. Well, actually it does. More about that in Part 3. Also in Part 3, I should easily pass the SQE with a first or a high 2-1. In fact, looking at the statistics, it's not so easy. We'll explain why. Also coming up in Part 3, SQE 2 for LPC graduates is just like the LPC skills. And in fact, it's so not like the LPC skills, even though on the surface it might look a bit like it. We'll unpack that as well. And finally, one of the SQE myths and half-truths we'll be looking at in Part 3 will be the SQE has made becoming a solicitor more accessible. In some respects it has, but in so many ways it hasn't. And we'll unpack that, particularly of interest, I'm sure, for those of you from a social mobility background. So there we are. That was SQE myths and half-truths Part 2. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do come onto the platform every Wednesday at 3 o'clock when our new videos drop. Do like and subscribe to the channel. And now it's time to enjoy our jingle one more time.
If you wanna be solicitors, why